Hey, and welcome to the Shetland Times podcast this week. And for Halloween, or Hallowe'en, which is coming up in the following week, we've got a spooky special where we're concentrating on the Windhouse in Yale. For anyone who doesn't know, this is going to test me now. Windhouse is a big laird house built in Yale in 1705, I believe. And it was 1707, and it was remodelled in 1885. And it's famously Shetland's most haunted house, sitting up on the hill. I've spoken to a number of folk this week about Windhouse and the different aspects of the stories behind it. So it's a really exciting episode because it's not just one person. I'm talking to different folk in Shetland about different parts of Windhouse. So in this episode I have Davy Cooper speaking about the kind of stories we have revolving around Windhouse, the mysteries and legends there. And then we talked to Dr. Val Turner about a recent discovery at Windhouse which you may have seen in the news, and what implications that may have on any future constructions there, and what it can tell us a bit more about our own past. And lastly, I have an anecdote or a story of his experience from Mike Grundon when he went to Windhouse for Radio Shetland to record a story, and it's a great tale to end this week's podcast with. So to begin with, we'll hear the excerpt from Davy Cooper. Davy Cooper started by telling a story about the famous story about the sailor who went to Windhouse and battled this monster. And as you'll hear in the interview with Davy, there's different representations or different ideas of what this monster looked like or how it was embodied. And I really got straight into the story with Davy because he started saying it and I realised it was gold, so I just hit record. So here we are speaking about the sailor who got left in Yale about Yule time and was battling this monster. Do you call it a shadow?
Well, that's what it was described as to me in the first versions of that I heard. That it was human in form but had no features. It was dark,
yeah,
and it was almost like a shadow, but a shadow that moved. There are other stories that speaks about it as being a formless shadow. There are other stories that I think are completely wrong that speak about it being a trout.
I've heard of a story of it being a giant beast,
Yeah,
but not a trout.
But I tend towards the shadow one. And there's several versions of that story that you can pick up, and I hear one particular one that I tell that used to do with a Spence family that lived there, and their parents dying,
yeah,
on a kind of one on an annual basis, and the sailor comes in for a shipwreck and stays the night and kills the ghost. But there's also quite a lot of pretty legends that's attached to Windhouse, often above that one main one.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be a tall man with a top hat.
I have heard that one who walks up and down the stairs or something. Yeah.
There's the inevitable grey lady that wanders on every haunted house. I'm not sure if it's the same one that goes to all the haunted houses, or is it a different one but again, she was meant to be looking for a bairn, which is basically the same as the Boosty story. But we the added thing that my grandfather was for Yale, for the hair. And his first job when he left school was working on the last time that they renovated Windows as a water boy.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he took buckets of water for the well and he took them around to the work mine so they could get a drink.
Yeah.
Years away from the job. And he said to me, now he was a great storyteller, so how much truth there in this I have no idea. But he said to me that when they were taking down the sides of the windows and the panelling, that they found a baby skeleton in the hand panel. And they told that this was a bairn that was being born to one of the serving lasses, and probably stillborn, and rather than taking it and getting it properly buried, and it nothing to the kirk that she was hid this burn of the Whitelock, then they should quietly dispose of the hunt the panelling.
The panelling though?
Yeah.
Rather as outside?
Yeah. That was probably to get rid of it as quickly as they could.
Oh.
And they wouldn't necessarily want it detained, so in case anybody saw. The suspicion was that was in the sons of the laird that was buried there. And therefore nobody would have wanted it kent outside the actual house.
Yeah.
And the other thing, of course, is the whole notion of the body under the doorstep.
Yeah.
And that was meant to be, again, one of the times that the place was being renovated and improved or whatever. They brought men up to South to work on it, like a company, and they brought other in joiners and stand masons and everything else. When they were finished, they were due to go down to Larrick the next day to catch the boat south, and they had a bit of a dram to kind of celebrate the completion of this contract, and two of them fell a fighting, and one of them took a stand mason's hammer and happily they didn't kill them. And Ryder is being held up to go to inquests and whatever else and give evidence. They just lifted the doorstep that they were been working on that day. It wasn't set in place yet. They lifted and pat the body underneath, pat the doorstep back, and therefore the police and that never kent about it. And they were able to go and catch the boat the next day and ging south. And that certainly was the story attached to that particular.
Yeah.
And you can imagine that there would be a certain potential for truth in that as well. Because, I mean, would you really want to be stuck up here for another 6 months? Probably not getting paid and waiting for...
When was that supposedly meant to happen?
I would think that's probably somewhere around about the late 1800s.
And was there a body found at the doorstep?
And the only thing is that they're finding bodies left, right, and centre now.
That is
because
true.
there's a graveyard up there.
It's like,
So,
have you seen Poltergeist?
yeah.
It's like Poltergeist, but instead of a Native Indigenous American burial, it's a Viking burial.
Yeah.
It's a Shetland version.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. I mean, there have been bodies running in the mud winters. And probably if you stuck down a shovel somewhere around about the house, you would have found a skeleton. There's a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
And you can see why the legends would. And if you look down now between Windhouse and the sea, I mean, there's just lumps and bumps and bits of brach and bits of Neolithic house.
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole park is just strewn with archaeology. For the house done it. And the house itself is probably on top of a burial site and B, probably a bit of brach as well.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a complicated performance to sort that out.
Thank you, Davy. That was Davy Cooper on some of the legends and mysteries and stories of Windhouse. Now we're going to go to a much more modern look at the building as we speak to Dr. Val Turner, Shetland's regional archaeologist, about an exciting find that you may have heard about in the news already. I am currently joined by Dr. Val Turner. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us on this special for Windhouse. But would you like to introduce yourself to Shetlanders of who you are and what you do?
Okay, I am the Shetland archaeologist, the regional archaeologist for Shetland, which means that apart from anything else, we keep a record of all the archaeological sites in Shetland, and when people want to build on them or anything like that, we check out what needs to be done and we make sure that it is done if it needs to. And so that's how we have come to get involved with Windhouse.
Yeah, because that story was in the news. That was in the national news as well, wasn't it?
It was, yes. Because somebody now wants to develop that site, and because it's jammed between a broch and also what was marked on the map as a graveyard, we therefore realised that some archaeological work needed to happen in advance so that we could find out exactly what the situation was and what implications developing the site would have on the archaeology and what needed to be done.
That's amazing. So you knew that there was features around the site, but had no idea what the site would actually unearth? Or...
We didn't know for certain, but of course there have always been rumours about Windhouse being really haunted. And the fact that there was a graveyard marked nearby, and the fact also that sometimes graveyards are associated with brochs when the broch goes out of use. I guess it's probably a stony area that people aren't going to cultivate, and so therefore they think, oh well, that's a place that they can bury the bodies.
I never realised that before.
Yes, there's a few examples in Shetland, one of which was at Upper Scalloway, which was excavated back at the end of the 80s.
Oh wow. And that's also interesting because wasn't it the old graveyard as well? They didn't have was around them.
No, these are really places where people were buried in amongst kind of the ruins of other things. So we also excavated on Nos, where there were bodies buried in amongst other ruins, and you found they're kind of like curled up and all at funny angles
to fit in.
Just to fit in.
Whoa.
Yes. So they didn't actually worry too much about having people buried flat or indeed very deep either. They're often quite shallow.
Would they have still been buried, I don't know how you tell it, ceremoniously, like with goods with them as well? Or?
Well, no, these are all Christian burials or later burials.
Okay.
So we're talking kind of 13th, 14th century. So they are people who have been buried, generally speaking, without anything, unless they happen to have something on their clothing that has survived, which might sometimes be the case, or sometimes people today are buried with a ring or a watch or something on, in which case you would find that kind of thing. But it wasn't that there were ceremonial things being buried with folk.
Okay, so at Windhouse, what exactly did they find? Or whom, should I say?
Well, we don't know who they are. Certainly, we found evidence of 2 people buried in very shallow graves, and because it was an assessment to advise what may or may not then happen in the future, the graves weren't completely excavated. So all they did was uncover a couple of graves and discover that there are people there, and then they covered them up again. And if that area is going to be developed, and I think the thinking was that particular area might be a parking area, and in which case, well, whatever you do in that area, they're so near to the surface that would start to damage the grave. So people would be taken out. And there are various things in the law about how you treat human remains when you find them, when you're developing. So there's things that you absolutely have to do so that the bodies would be taken out and treated with respect. Yeah. They would be studied, I'm sure, to get more information about exactly when they were buried and maybe a bit more about who they were and what they did. Because you can tell all sorts of things from bones. And then they would be reburied, and they'd probably be reburied in a churchyard in Yale, I would think. Yeah,
because I remember at uni, because I studied archaeology, was that we worked with human remains from the medieval times to study the skeleton, and they told us because if it was a Christian burial that they dug up, when they rebury them, then they would actually have a prayer, or like actually adhere to the original burial they would have had.
Yes, we've done that before with some of the human remains that have been found in other contexts. Yeah. They've been put back in the ground, and sometimes we've had the minister there as well.
That's quite nice. I think that's really nice. But I know there's a lot of issues now as well. This is going off topic with pagan burials and pagan remains, and then you have pagan groups who want to reacquire the remains.
Yeah, that's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah. But these were Christian remains here.
But these are Christian remains, yes. I mean, some of the earliest remains that are found at St Ninian's Isle are pre-Christian, so effectively pagan, but not at Windhouse, where they are effectively Christian remains.
That's amazing. So if they did then go to develop that area, would there have to be a full excavation of the area?
There would have to be more excavation, depending on what the development was going to be and how it happened, how it was going to affect both the graves and also the Broch site. So yes, what the excavations did show is that there are a couple of directions which they could extend in or do other things in without doing any damage to anything archaeological at all.
Okay.
So there is scope to do things without impacting on the archaeology if that's what the person chose to do. And that's the kind of information that this kind of work gives people, so that they can find out and it can inform their thinking before they actually go as far as putting in the planning permission. So we like to work with people early on, so that we can kind of avoid things if necessary.
It was pretty intense thing to find.
Well, yes, I suppose it wasn't unexpected.
No, that I suppose.
Because of all the rumours about Windhouse and all, I've always felt that, okay, if you've got a haunted house and all these bodies are supposed to have been found in amongst the house, and of course stories get exaggerated, but if you build a house on top of a graveyard, what do you expect to find?
It's like Poltergeist, but the Shetland version.
Maybe.
But I also think it's really interesting what you said about the fact that they'd often use ruins to bury the dead in, because there's already like disturbed ground that they couldn't work on. Because that makes me think about all these, like, you hear the haunted ruins all the time, if that is something that goes hand in hand, because people in distant past associated that with a burial site at the same time.
Well, sometimes I think that's the case, yes.
That's amazing. But that's really, really interesting. So where do they date from again?
Well, we don't know for certain.
Okay.
So I'm only guessing that they're going to be 13th, 14th, possibly 15th century on the basis of the Scalloway ones, really.
Okay.
But, which were around about 1500. But we remain to find out as and when the bodies are lifted, because as I say, at the moment, they're just still where we found them.
Yes. Back resting again. At
Yes.
Windhouse. Thank you very much for your time today.
You're very welcome.
That was Dr. Val Turner there. And lastly, we're going to go and hear a story from Mike Grundon. This is a brilliant story that he'll recount about an experience he's had up at Windhouse. And I'll just leave you over with Mike Grundon. And that will be the end of the podcast when he finishes. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing everything so far, and you've enjoyed this kind of special with different folk speaking about Windhouse. And again, if you have any ideas for future podcasts, please do get in touch. But this is not the end, because we still have to hear this brilliant story from Mike Grundon.
I decided I was going to make a programme about the Windhouse and all of the ghost stories that there were around it. And we thought it would be a really good idea to do it for BBC Radio Shetland just a few days before Hallowe'en. It was a dark night. I'd already done a week's work. I think it was maybe a Friday night. And I went up there with a man who knew all the stories. And I went up there with a mini disc recorder. It was the sort of recording technology we used every day of our lives. I'd used it for many, many, many hours of interviews up until then. And it always seemed to work particularly well. But we arrived up in Yell, at the foot of the hill below the Windhouse. And it was all of the atmospheric things that you would like to see on a ghost story night. We pulled the car over to the side of the road and we got out, and there was like a wind was blowing in from the west, and there were clouds scudding across the face of a moon. It wasn't quite full, I think it was a little bit off the full moon, but it was dark, but it had that silvery light of the moon all around it. And so I started up the tape recorder at the bottom of the hill and said, right, well, here we are at the foot of the hill. There's the Windhouse up there in the shadows against the skyline. We're going to go up and find out a little bit more about it. So I said to the chap who was there with me, I said, you ready to go up and we'll talk a bit? And he said, yep, that's great. So we closed the doors of the car and we headed off. It's not a long walk up that hill, and we're getting closer and closer to it, climbing over fences, and we got nearer and nearer to it, and it's just a big skeleton of a building in its own right, dark windows, and part of the roof was missing and bits had fallen off it. The closer you get, it's just getting darker and it's blacker, but we're talking as we go and we're describing what it looks like and trying to paint word pictures of what it is that we're like. And the ground is squelching underfoot and the wind is blowing and howling through, because there's some wires nearby, so it's blowing through the wires as well. And there's the moon and the clouds, and sometimes it'd be really dark when the cloud would come across the moon, and then sometimes it'd be bright. It was really atmospheric. It was very impressive. So we got up out to the front of the Windhouse, and we walked across to it, and we're chatting away on, and I'm being told about how ghosts were rising up out of the floor in front of the house, and little noises and things, and all of the different ghosts that there are connected with this, and there are a hell of a lot of them as well. So we had a wee torch, and we went up to one of the ground windows and shone a torch in through the window, and then there was two glowing eyes looking back out at us, and so we jumped a massive jump, and turned out it was just a sheep that had gone in there to try and rescue, or try to shelter itself from the wind, which was picking up at this stage. So we walked around the back, and we stopped and recorded the sound of the wind blowing through gaps, and the sound of because there were boards that had lined the wall, and they were sort of waving about and creaking and banging on each other, and there's this constant wailing of the wind. It was really atmospheric stuff. We went all the way around the back of the house. We were looking in through the doors and in through the windows. I don't think we actually went in because it was windy and there was a real danger that something might fall on us. So we finished this recording, came out to the front of the house and said, "That's it. We're all done. This is the Windhouse. This is the moon and the clouds, and it really feels like a spooky place." And that was it. We just switched off and left, and we had about 20 minutes of recording. Actually, I looked at the timer on the mini disc recorder, and there was 20 minutes had gone by. So we got in the car and we drove home, and that was that for that day. The truth is, I didn't actually feel that the house felt spooky at all. It just kind of felt sad and empty, and smelled a bit damp and a bit of sheep and stuff like that. And it didn't feel creepy. It didn't feel frightening at all. Just sort of sad and empty. So the following day, I seem to recall it'll have been a Saturday, and I went into work because this piece of work needed to be edited and put together in time for a program that was going out on Monday. So I went into the studios at BBC Radio Shetland and went up into the little editing suite that we had at the time in Studio 7, and I put the mini disc recorder into the player, and to try and transfer the audio into the computer where I'd be doing the editing. So I switched it on to play, and had the headphones on, and I was listening away, and I can hear us getting out of the car, a little bit of conversation at the foot of the hill. We're going to go up the hill now and have a look at the Windhouse. There's the clunk of the car doors shutting. There's a couple of footsteps as we're working our way around the car and crossing the road, and then it stopped, and there was nothing there. The tape stopped playing, the mini disc stopped playing, there was nothing there. And I thought to myself, I got the mini disc out again. I thought, it's gone technical, something's gone wrong. So I put the mini disc recorder back into the player, and there it was. There was still 20 minutes of recording for that. So I tried it in the mini disc player, the mini disc recorder. I tried playing it in the mini disc recorder, and it would get those first few sentences, and then it would stop again, and it wouldn't go any further. So I tried it in several different mini disc players that I had all around the studios. None of them worked, and so there was a way of restoring audio. You had to sort of change the settings on some of the machines and basically put the mini disc recorder in, try to blank it, and then switch it off halfway through, and it would restore all of the audio that was ever on that disc. It wouldn't have any edit points all the way through. It was just a continuous track. So I did this and got it back, put it into the editing, the player that's tied into the editing machine, and started to listen to it all the way through, and it came to the same point, and then it jumped 20 minutes over this big black spot in the mini disc recorder. Couldn't work out what had happened. I tried reversing down from the other side. I went to the end of the tape effectively and played it backwards, came down to the point where it would be 20 minutes after the start of that recording. It got that far and it wouldn't go any further. So something had been recorded there, but there was no audio and you couldn't play it. It wouldn't work. I was just absolutely baffled and a bit distraught really, because I'd spent all Friday night doing this recording and then spent most of Saturday trying to get the audio to come out of it. So in the end I just had to abandon it, and we did a program. We brought the chap who was going to be telling me all about the Windhouse into the studio, and it was a really boring interview just across the table. But I sent the mini disc off to BBC engineers in Inverness, and they looked at it and played with it, and they couldn't work out how this had been done. They'd never seen it happen before, had no idea how it could be reproduced, and to this day I still have no idea. I'd used that mini disc recorder for many hours of recording beforehand, and I used it for many hours afterwards as well, for days, months. I had that very reliable little mini disc recorder for probably about 3 or 4 years of my time here at Radio Shetland, and it never happened before, it never happened since, and the only time it has ever let me down like that was that 20 minutes that I spent up at the Windhouse in Yale.
So ghosts.
Who knows?
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you.